The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Margaret. Margaret's going to tell us all about her life. So, Margaret, if you could tell me when and where you were born, maybe leave out the when, because you're a lady. And if you could describe to me what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received.
Well, I was born in Washington, D.C., and my parents met during World War II. My mom grew up right outside D.C. in Maryland, and that's where we lived for the first 7 years of my life.
Was it in that big White House there?
Yes, but no, I did go. You didn't have to have invitations. You could just show up for things like the Easter egg hunt and stuff like that. So I remember going. My grandmother lived about a block away, my aunts and uncles, and then 2 blocks further was my great-grandmother. It was really kind of a small town atmosphere. The school was behind my grandmother's house. And the main things I remember from that time, because mostly my story revolves around how am I going to get closer to God. And what I remember as a 3-year-old, even a 4-year-old, I don't remember ever believing in Santa Claus. Right from the beginning, I thought, I don't believe this at all. But I always believed in Jesus, which is interesting. I had no problem with that.
Let's just take it back just a second there. So you didn't believe in Father Christmas?
No.
So did you get any presents?
Yes, because I
on Jesus' birthday.
Wasn't but dumb enough to tell my parents I didn't believe in Santa Claus. I just never did. I remember really getting in trouble. I can't remember my younger sister. She's only about 1.5 years younger. She was still talking about Santa Claus in 3rd grade, and I was like, "Come here, honey."
You didn't spoil it for her.
Well, I can't help it. I just thought people would be making fun of her if she was still believing in Santa Claus that long. Yeah. But what did happen, my parents would go to lots of different churches. And I remember once going into a church that we eventually went to full time. And even as a child, I learned a lot about Jesus, went to vacation Bible school. We went to church every Sunday. The church was actually that we went to was right across the street from my great-grandparents' house. So the school, the church, it was all there. We went into this different church, and I had such a feeling that I had actually couldn't put words to it. Later I did, but it was up till then I felt like I had learned a lot about God and Jesus, but that day I felt like I met him. I just felt this feeling of intelligence and peace and love. It's such aliveness. And I probably have been seeking for that again my whole life. So then a couple of things happened when I was about 7. So my parents joined this new church and we moved to New Jersey. My father started a business and he was diagnosed with, I forget what it's called, ALS, but often referred to as Lou Gehrig's disease, which is the same disease that Stephen Hawking has. So
didn't go well for him, did it?
It often hits men in their 30s. That's when it all started. And that's how old my dad was at the time. There were 5 children in the family. And we went to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they actually have a belief, we have a belief that, of oil blessings, you can bless someone. Yeah. And he was blessed that he would live to raise his family. And the disease actually stopped at that point, which is interesting. And he started his business, and we went to 1 year at a new school, and that's the year I was baptized. And what I remember mostly about that time is I had a little white Bible. And as part of a school trip, we went to a printing press. And the printers because you could do it then, you couldn't now. They gave us a tiny little, what would you call it? Just parts of a Bible. So it had Psalms and Proverbs and the New Testament in it. And when I was upset at that age, I would go in my room and I would read my Bible. I don't know, maybe other kids would play video games. We didn't have them then, but I would read my Bible and I would feel very peaceful and calm after a while. I'd just feel better. So I liked it. We moved to a new neighborhood, went to a different school. And of course, I'm at the leading edge of the baby boomers. Now, at this point, my mom has more kids. We eventually end up with 11 children in the family. But
Good grief. Obviously, you didn't have a television at the time.
Right. That's I say that all the time because I
Lots of
ended up
power
with 8
cuts.
kids. That's right. And someone looked at us when we had my 8 kids and I said, we don't have a television. But it was like, what else are you going to do? Yeah. Anyway, it was one of those new neighborhoods, where they made them all look alike. You had maybe like 4 models of homes you could put up, and new streets. It had been an old farm with, one tree in front of each house, one little stick of a tree. And I was out riding my bike one day and I thought, I am lost. I mean, everything looked the same. When I was in 4th grade, I thought, I am really lost. But I knew there was a little stream there, and I knew there was a bridge over the stream, and I kept trying to find that bridge because I knew where I lived in relation to that bridge. And this was during the time when moms stayed home. I suppose at any point, if I'd wanted to, I could have gone and knocked on a door and asked for help. But, when you're 9, 10 years old, you don't want to do that. So, but what I did do,
so you're directionally challenged at that age.
And my whole life. So I actually remember kneeling beside my bike and just saying, I'm lost and I don't know where to go. And I had a thought. And the thought was, go down to the end of this one street and look right. And so I got on my bike and drove down to the end of the street and looked right, and I saw the bridge. So I was able to get home. And I'd probably been lost half an hour. So I had a sense that God was real, that I could ask him for help and I would get it. So at that age. Now, I was at that point, what they used to do is give us intelligence tests, and then you got put in a class based on how smart you were. And so when I went to junior high, what happened is I got put in with the super smarts, which I always thought was unfair because I can remember some of my friends who didn't get in that class saying, and they actually named the class like A, B, C, and D, right? So the people in the D class were like, well, I'll probably never get more than D's because, I'm not very smart, as if there weren't different kinds of smarts. So yeah, it was difficult. And so I of course was fast tracked for college, and I was in advanced placement courses. I was doing math early. I was doing calculus and physics and chemistry. And what I noticed over time is that there were fewer and fewer girls in my class. Are they pretending to be dumb so that boys will, that's kind of what I thought. I really did think that, but you say math to a lot of people and you can see their eyes glows over. You don't like, I take it back. Forget I said that word. So yeah. And during this time, you couldn't actually, in the United States now, lots and lots of kids will take college classes their last 2 years of high school and get college credit for it. But that wasn't available to me. So I just skipped my last year of high school and went off to college. And at this time, we had a big family, lived in a neighborhood. I'd been baptized in my church. I went every Sunday. And
so on the Sundays then, when you went to church, after your confirmation, how old were you? Roughly.
Oh, well, our church is a little different. We were baptized and confirmed at the same time when we're 8. Because it's like you can't really make the choice before then. And so we just believe anybody who dies before 8 is just covered by Christ's grace, because Paul tells us we're only going to be held accountable for the law we knew, which makes some people think, well, I don't need more law. But I think of it as, okay, if the laws lead to a happy life, you want more law, not less, right? But kind of.
So So from the age of 8 then, on a Sunday, you'd go into church and did you take communion?
Yes. So we
So
call it
every
sacrament.
Sunday,
Yes,
yeah,
every
so every
Sunday.
Sunday
Every Sunday.
you're
Yep.
you're having a slug of wine.
Well, actually, in our church, we use water, but there you go. And so it's interesting because we have the children take it. At first, I thought, oh, no, they shouldn't take it because they haven't yet been baptized or confirmed. But again, we believe that Christ's atonement covers them
Mm,
until they reach the age of reason. And so therefore, they do take it. So we
mm.
all take it. Um, unless you feel unworthy. In which case, you want to go get that handled pretty quick. Yeah. And I've had, people are like, I don't know, I was so mad this morning at my husband, I thought I can't take that. It's like, no, that's when you want to take it more.
Mm.
That's really want to invite that into your life. Yeah. So, yeah. But what we do have is 4 years of early morning study. So every morning for the 3 years I was in high school, since I wasn't in for 4,
Mm.
we met as a small group at the church and studied the scriptures during school time. And that was very grounding. Also, we were exhausted. You couldn't get in too much trouble because you picked up so early, that kind of thing.
So was
Yeah.
this before school? So it was a before
Yes.
school class as opposed to an after school class?
Yes, it was. It was a before school
Mm.
class. It's called early
Was
morning for a reason.
was that voluntarily or were
Mhm.
you forced into it?
No, I wanted to go. I had some
Mm,
friends who didn't want to go. Their parents didn't make them. But
mm.
in fact, my mother would say, Margaret, you're when you're tired, you're crabby. And so she made me miss one day a week every week so I could catch up on my sleep. And I would have been happy to go. I liked it. It's like
Weren't
I'd
just
like
sleeping
service.
on a Saturday.
No, she wanted me in the middle of the week, Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember. It was one day I
Mm,
wasn't allowed to go. I had to sleep in. Yeah.
fair one.
Yeah. And then,
So this was all in New Jersey, was it?
this was all in New Jersey. Yes.
Yeah.
Then I had one older brother. All my other siblings are younger. So I say, well,
Mm.
I'm a recovering oldest daughter. If anyone has an older sister, you know what I'm talking about. You're like, that bossy, tried to tell me what to do. I said, well, I was trying to get over that. Okay. And while I was gone, my parents moved, but they didn't mention it. Because it
They
happened fast.
didn't mention
No,
it.
they didn't mention it. So what happened? They called home at Thanksgiving. So my brother and I went to college the same year. And we called home just to say hi at Thanksgiving. We were visiting some relatives. And the phone came out as the line was disconnected. And I thought, we've had that same phone number. I could tell you the phone number now for, 10 years. So I don't understand this. And then later, my parents called us and they're just chatting away. Hey, how's your Thanksgiving? And so I said, well, I just want to mention that our phone was disconnected. And he said, yeah, we moved. We were going to tell you. I was like, "Oh."
Are you sure I was going to tell you?
That's right. You thought you'd gotten away, but you hadn't. So they moved from the suburbs out onto 40 acres in a part of New Jersey that it's called the Garden State for a reason. That
Mm.
actually, there's a lot of farmers there, and they would sell all their produce to a Del Monte plant, which was nearby. So
The man from Del Monte, he say yes.
yes.
Or no.
So I have 6 younger brothers who are all born, one right after the other. And my parents, I think, just needed them out where they could be active and busy and running around and have farm chores to do. So, and I got married at 20, just as I turned 20. I didn't quite finish my degree. I had about a year left when I married. And just before our first anniversary, we had our first child. And then we had 8 children in 11 years.
Blimey. So that's all going on with the family tradition of having lots and lots of kids then.
Having lots of kids. I wanted them. I had lots of younger brothers and sisters. And when my second son was born, my second child, my mother was going to come out, and then she was kind of maybe not, and then finally she said, "Well, your dad's in the hospital. He has something wrong with him. They don't know. They've checked for all the good stuff, and it turned out he had a form of leukemia." He was 49 at the time, and my youngest sister was 3, and it was the kind that most people, especially back then, the survival rate was about 6 months to a year. And again, he was given a blessing that he would live to raise his children, and he actually went into remission. I remember fasting and praying. We believed in fasting and praying, and I remember fasting and praying that my father would be healed and feeling like he would, and then a week later doing it again. About the third time I did it, I felt the Spirit say, I've already it was almost kind of irritated with me. Look, I've told you he's going to be healed, so stop asking. I was like, oh, okay. But I'm already fasting, which is like for 24 hours without food, and you're praying. I'm already halfway through it. I hate to, lose a good fast. So maybe what should I be praying for? And he said, well, just thank me that this blessing is coming. And I think, so I often tell people that if you got the answer that the blessing is coming and it hasn't come yet, then start thanking him. Just thank him for this blessing is coming. And he was, as I said, he went into remission. It's interesting that when my youngest sister was a senior in high school, she actually did what I did. She skipped her senior year and went off to college, but she was the age of a senior. Both of those diseases came back, and he died of, I don't know which one, because he had both, the Lou Gehrig's disease and the leukemia, in May of that year. And May is pretty traditional in the United States, or used to be, for when school ended and when you would have high school graduation. So I'm thinking, I guess he figures you're raised when you finish that level of school. You're done. Okay. Yeah.
So the youngest one was just going into college, and that's when he moved on.
He moved on.
So did that mess up her graduation? And,
no, because as I said, like I did, she also skipped her senior year. And so she wasn't around for those activities anyway. Yeah. Although she's gay. I don't know. Back in that time, you probably wouldn't take a girlfriend to prom. But yeah.
Funny you should say about gay. I did a Master of Ceremony last week at a gay wedding.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, praise silence for the bride and the bride.
There you go. What a way to start it. Yeah, I had a friend who just remarried, and they weren't quite sure how to start it because it wasn't a traditional church wedding.
I got briefed up before it all, so I didn't put my big size 9s into it at all.
Okay, very good. Let me see. So at this time, a couple of things are important, and one is that I heard a person say in church, I prayed about this, and I know you're supposed to stay on your knees and write in your journal, and any thoughts that come, you want to write down what God's saying to you. And I thought, I didn't know that. somehow I missed the memo. So I said, I had this prayer. I said to God, I would like to learn to hear when you're talking to me. I'd had that one experience, right, of the when I was lost, but that was sort of in the mists of time. And so I said, I don't even know how you could help me learn to hear your voice if I haven't heard it by now, but I'm trusting you can figure it out. Yeah. And that week I had 3 experiences where, and one was where I kept having a thought that I should invite a family to dinner on a Monday. And I was thinking, well, these people just came to dinner Friday. Don't you think that'd be a little weird? And so I thought, I'm not doing that. I'll call them on Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with 8 kids, Monday's a wash day, is it?
Yes,
got all
there
the
you
washing
go.
hanging out. You don't want people coming out for dinner, do you?
Yeah. So then the thought came back, and I thought, well, so it came back 3 times, and the 3rd time it came back, I was saying, well, like you said, Monday night's a pretty busy night, and we have actually a scripture study with our children where we try to do a little gospel study. And the thought came, invite them to stay for that. So I thought, oh, wait, maybe this is God. Maybe this is God. I should just find out. So I called, I invited them. They came to dinner. We had this scripture study talking about God. We were actually talking about tithing. And the father said, tithing is when you give 10% to the Lord. He gave you everything, you give 10% back. So as we finished that small lesson, the father said, we were out of food. We had a little money, and it was just enough to pay our tithing or buy food. And we really prayed about it and decided to go ahead and pay the tithing. And he said, on Sunday before we left church, we had invitations to dinner every night this week, except tonight. So I was basically an answer to prayer. And I had 2 other experiences similar to that week where a thought would come, I would kind of blow it off. The thought would come again. And the 3rd time it came, I'd think, oh, maybe, I'll just test it. And each time, people don't always tell you this, but each time the people would say, I've been praying for this. And I thought, oh, so for me, this is what God's voice sounds like. It is quiet. You talk about the still small voice. There is a sense of peace, of confidence that comes with it. And so I began to pay more attention to that voice, probably the way most people do, just kind of randomly, or I might be praying for something. And I would listen, I might be journaling, but I wasn't specifically turning my life over to him. So what happened is this. My first husband was bipolar and gay. I think maybe bisexual because we had 8 kids, right? But about 25 years into the marriage, I was pretty much done. And it felt like I was married to Peter Pan. I don't want to grow up. It wasn't because he was gay. It wasn't because he was bipolar. It was because he didn't want to work and he just wanted to stay home. And he didn't even act like a house husband. It's not like he was fixing meals or keeping the house clean or anything. It was like having a rebellious teen in the house, and I had enough rebellious teens in the house. I didn't need one more leading the pack. And so after 25 years, we ended the marriage, and now I'm in my mid 40s, and I clearly he wasn't working. And in my 30s, early 30s, I had gone to work in the high tech industry and moved up, and in a decade or so, I was on the executive level, making a decent income. So I was the sole financial support. The 8 children, half were in college, half were in high school at that time, were still in the house because the ones who went to college, that was how I could help them financially. You can stay here and eat. But you got to handle everything else yourself. It was overwhelming. I decided to finish my degree because I was working for companies that were now going public. And they really wanted their executives to have degrees. That's when you go public, you have to list all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I only have a year left. I think I can get that done. And so all 3 of those things would be a full-time job. Going to school full-time, having 8 children, even older ones. Actually, they take more time. You're driving them everywhere. Right.
Well,
And yes.
make them walk.
Some of them couldn't, like they'd be going to work, which was like 5 miles away. And we don't have public transportation like they do in the UK. It's not like you hop on the bus. People assume you're going to have
You
a
should
car.
have bought push bikes.
Push bikes. Yes. Yeah. So
Kill
and they
2 birds with 1 stone.
did actually walk, or they carpooled with friends. I mean, it's not like I could drive them all everywhere they needed to be, but it's still, I like to show up for their games, somewhere in sports, just things like that. And then I was, as I said, going to school full time, and I was mostly doing that at night and maybe an online class or 2. They had just barely started those. So I I knew how to make to-do lists and how to prioritize them. You don't make it to the executive level without figuring that out. So I knew how to do that. And I just could not. There was too much. Even if all I did was put the most important, the most critical, the most, this is foundational, and it'll make my life go easier everywhere else if I just do this. I would have a to-do list that was just, I was getting about 4 hours sleep at night. And even then in the middle of the night, I would wake up with this sense of panic. What am I not getting done? What did I forget? And then sometimes I would do things and it would turn out it didn't need to be done. I would take a paper in and there would be this note on the professor's door that basically said, "Professor's sick. The paper won't be due till Friday." And I think, well, the couple hours I spent finishing that, I could have been doing something else. Or I'd go into a client's and they'd say, "We're glad you finished that report. We're going to pay you for it, and your company, but we've decided to change the whole thing." Yeah, of course. And so I was thinking, if only I knew the future. And then I thought, well, I know who does know the future. And so this is how I started this prayer. I started just going to God. I would take my list, my little list of things that I'd written down, and I'd say, what should I do today? And then I would just look through the list and I would cross some things off. I might add something. And usually if I added something, it was to give someone a call or do a bit of service for someone else. That's how it started. And within a few weeks, if I only focused on what I was given to do by God, I didn't add things. You know how we are. Well, I don't know. I think I can do that in an hour. And I just add this other thing. Right. Yeah. Okay. If I didn't add things, I was finished every night by 8. I could sit and enjoy my kids. I was getting plenty of sleep. And even it moved over into travel because I'm back in the DC area at this time. So at this time, I'm back in the DC area. That's where I'm living and working. And traffic there is really bad. It's like LA. I don't know what it's like in London. And so here's how it works. When you get out there, you're either going to be a half hour early or a half hour late because it turned out there wasn't any traffic, but you allowed for it, or you didn't allow enough. Maybe Obama decided to go golfing, and so they've closed everything down, and you can't get around the freeway. But I would be in that situation, and I would think, you know what? God's got my back. He's got it handled. They're going to be late too. Something else will happen that they'll be, oh, thank goodness. It'll all work out. And it always worked out. So I got a lot of confidence in that. And then my life truly changed because what I was doing at that point was saying, when I was initially saying, what should I do? But that question eventually turned into, what do you want me to do? And it's interesting. I was finishing up my degree as quickly as I could. And at some point, the thought came, you should do environmental management. And I thought, environmental systems. And so I thought, I just want to get this degree done. I don't even know how many credits that would add or, to have that as a major. Well, it turned out there was some special program. It wasn't necessarily a major, or it was, I forget what it was called, but you just get a certificate in it. And so I thought, okay, I need some extra credits anyway. I'll add that. And I started those classes, and one of them was some kind of biology class. It was like a level 3. You had to have had level 1 and 2. And I thought, well, I don't have time to do level 1 and 2. I'm going to have to ask the professor to let me in. And so I went there, and this has happened to me more than once. I went there thinking, well, I need this class. It's up to you, God, if you want me to get this certificate. And I can remember standing beside the professor's desk, and he's signing the paper to let me take the class, even though I don't have the first 2 courses. And as he's signing it, he's saying, I never do this. I don't know why I'm doing this. And then gave me the paper. I'm not going to say, I think it's God. And then I used that degree. So I what happened is my first marriage was over. You haven't asked any questions yet, Tim. I feel like I'm just going on
Well,
and
I'm
on.
trying to get a word in.
Sorry,
So,
shutting up.
so let's just take you back just a little bit. You work in big tech. What area of big tech were you in? What was it? Computers? Was it electronics of some sort?
Those
What
computers, software.
computers? So you're in the software for Apple computers or for Windows machines or for
Either.
mainframe stuff?
When I first started, I was doing what we call mini computers, like the PDP-11. And then what happened is I started working with one of the first IBM PC dealerships. And they also carried the Apple. And this was way back 86 when there was not a lot of software for it, not a lot of it being written. And hardly any mid-size or smaller companies had it. And I was working with some large-size companies like Abbott Labs and places like that, where they were putting them in their engineering departments. And my father had a construction business, so I understood that business. And so I actually took Yellow Pages phone book at the time. I just called all these different, I called law offices, I called doctors and dentists, I called construction firms. And a year later, I went back and looked to see who had bought, and it was all construction companies. They were just, I thought, okay, that's what I'm doing. And so and there was more and more software coming out. And so I focused on engineering, like computer aided design. At the time it was AutoCAD, places, things like that. I remember I was selling to Morton Thiokol, and we were putting in, they also called it CAM, computer aided manufacturing, where the designs would actually go into the machines that made it work. And so I worked with that. I worked with critical path scheduling, with estimating, with accounting. And I stayed in that industry as the systems became more and more robust, so they could handle.
So that's when you started climbing the greasy pole. So what level did you go in at to start with once you sort of got into
I
it?
mean, I had no work experience when I started working. So I just started as a salesperson on the floor, out meeting people. And I ended up with some major accounts. And then I went from that to sales manager. And then I went to regional manager. And then with one firm, I was basically their executive sales manager. And I was one of the few women. It turns out I didn't really like it. It felt like I was trying to manage, like I already had 8 kids at home. I really need.
So you got a sales force of kids then?
Yeah, it's kind of. If you get really good people in there, but not all of them are really good, then you're managing a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that usually, I mean, if everything's going well, you don't need to worry so much. And I liked working with the dealers because they owned their own businesses and they were easy to work with. So I like that. Yeah. So that's what I did. I had been a programmer, so I understood how computers worked really well. And I understood the software, what it was trying to do. And I was able to translate it into English. That would be my key skill set.
Yeah, I guess if you've got an understanding of how a computer system works in the first place, and then you're trying to sell it on to somebody, it's a good idea to have a bit of a basic knowledge of what it does.
But people who write the software tend to be more inclined to say, and then it does this and it does that. And I can tell you the executive wants to know is how easy it is to put the information and show me the reports that are coming out.
Yeah.
And can you change those reports to fit the reports we have? That's what they want to know.
Yeah.
And when I worked with home builders, it did things when we first started. I mean, it took a while. Now it's so common. But at the time, we were actually setting up each of their options so it would have a photo of it. And then we would set it out in all their sales offices so that they could sit down with people and say, or you could get this option, right? Just things like, and then if they said yes, they just had to click a button and it went right into their estimate for the house.
So it's like a CAD system to, like, they come around nowadays, if you're going to buy a kitchen, and they come
Yes,
around, measure up, and then they put in where
in the
everything's going
CAD.
to go, and it gives you a virtual look at what the kitchen's going to look like when it's in and finished. So,
Right.
and you were
And
doing that way back then.
yeah, and then we would set it up so it was linked to the estimating system. So I'd say, well, if they chose this, here's the 12 things we have to do, and here's going to
Mm.
be the cost to do it. And then they would have this whole estimate come out. Then you wanted that to go to the scheduling system so that they knew, before the guys came in here and could put the flooring in, that you had to have certain things in place. So it was the scheduling and the scheduling of the subcontractors, that all had to work together. And then that all rolled to accounting, who was going to start doing billings, right? Like, or paying. Like, the sub came
Yeah,
out and did this. Now we have to pay that sub. Yeah. So it
that's a
worked
good
good.
system then. So you take it from somebody comes in and they want a new build. So they sit down, sit down and design it. The system will then cost it, and then it will schedule it, clear the land. I guess the land's already been
Oh,
cleared to be built on, etc. And then it just rolls out a system where it goes from flash to bang. So you've got the groundwork, then you've got the initial build, and then you've got the second fix and the third fix going in, and then the keys go over. So,
yes.
wow, that's quite a system.
Yeah, and I often worked with major contractors, the ones who are building hospitals or
Mm,
huge highways and stuff like that. So yeah, I got to hang out with the guys who were making it happen. That's how it
wow.
felt. Yeah. But then I went to work for a company called ESRI, which is Environmental Systems Resource Information. And what they did was geographical information systems. And that was just before it became huge, just before
Mm,
everybody had maps on their phone, right? And
yeah.
so they ran on a mainframe with some PCs that hooked up to it. So, it was, our biggest clients were state and federal governments, and I worked for them. And what I was a regional manager for them over dealers, because that's what I like to do.
Mm,
And I had some of my own big accounts, which I like too.
mm. So what did that kind of involve? Just looking at the environmental issues, looking at where wastewater goes, where rainwater goes off. Is that the sort of environment you're looking at?
That's how it started. That's why it was called that, right?
Mm,
ESRI. But of course, you could use it for anything. So it was used for military operations. It was used for where would you put people if this was coming in? It was interesting because if you put in the land information, you could do something like, say, if we put a dam in here, how far would it back up and how much water would it hold based on the
mm.
land.
The current data of
Yes,
rainfall and
yes,
and the river flow and where its source is coming from, and
right.
yeah, that sounds. That's,
It was fun
mm,
to sell. It was fun. I liked working with it. It was just fun. Yeah.
yeah, sounds it. So let's move forward a little bit then. So your first husband did one, and you got a new husband.
Well, I hadn't planned to. So I had been on my own for a couple of years, and I had a 20-year plan. They tell you, come up with your 20-year plan. Where do you want to be? And I had chosen this particular company because it had a growth cycle, a 20-year growth cycle when I started with them. So I knew once my youngest son graduated high school, I could start to travel a lot more and could move way up in the executive level.
Mm,
And they would need people to do that because of their growth. So that was my plan. I was going to do that, and then until I was in my mid 60s, late 60s, and then I was going to retire with my fat 401k retirement and pension and owning everything. I'll have paid off my house by a certain time, and then I would go and serve for missions for my church and go out, maybe do
mm,
service missions and things like that. That's my plan. One day, I felt God say to me, "You're going to meet the man you're going to marry next fall." And I thought, no,
You're taking liberties now.
yeah, no, thank you. And my last two children at home were boys in high school. And I thought, I just don't see stepsons, stepdad. I don't see it. And, but I did meet and marry my husband, Bill. In my books, I call him Parker because his name is William Parker. And so we met, we got married. I moved to California, and he, at that time, California, gold country, right?
Yeah.
He lived on 10 acres in gold country, actually on top of an old gold mine. And he had put claims on some land that had an old gold mine on it with tailings. And he was making, another company actually was doing the work on it, and he was getting about $5,000 or $6,000 a month in royalties from that work that was done. And then I was making, so this is back in 97, I was making about 75,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 a month, which today's dollars would be about 150,000 a year. And so between those two things, we were going to be fine. And we had a plan. I say we had a good plan. Too bad none of it worked out. So I married him, and then I moved to California, and my two youngest sons are supposed to come with us. And they, at the last minute, just got furious. No, we're not coming. They moved in with their dad, who I figured that wouldn't last long. In the 6 months, they were out with us. But first, the federal government of the United States shut down that gold mine tailing operation. They called it an historic site. It's 100 miles from nowhere. So, but it's an historic site. So I'll let you know where it is if you ever want to visit it, because they shut it down. And then the company I was working with had said I could do the same job in California. But then at the last minute, they changed their mind and said, no, but if you want to be a dealer, you can. So I thought, okay, well, so now we have no income coming in. So we went from thinking we were going to have $12,000 a month. He had some small pension that he had taken early to $1,200 a month to try to live on US dollars. And I think I had a car payment, and I had to pay medical insurance for my kids, and the standard stuff, utility bills. We were so I just started selling computers again to construction companies. And, yeah, so now I'm in California with my new husband, given to me by God. So you would think, oh, a match made in heaven. That must be.
Yeah.
Well,
brilliant. No,
it wasn't. It was not. So at one point, I remember thinking, have I just repeated myself? My grandfather had a problem with alcoholism. And, you kind of pass those things down.
Yeah.
Even if my parents didn't drink, but their attitudes and the way you handle problems and stuff is what get passed down. And so my first husband was the son of an abusive man who had only stopped drinking because he also joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And now my second husband's father was an abusive alcoholic. And so I thought, so I see, I don't marry abusive alcoholics. I marry sons of abusive alcoholics and then deal with whatever they're dealing with. I remember one day just kneeling beside my bed saying, it's not like I have to stay married to this man. We don't have children. We'd only been married maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months at the time. But I need something to hang on to. What had often gotten me through hard times in the past was a scripture or some kind of promise that I could just say to myself in the worst of times. And I had this thought, was all will be made whole as a result of this marriage. At the time, I took that to mean my children and myself, but I eventually saw it was also referring to my husband's children from his first marriage. Between the two of us, we have 15. And so I knew from studying the scriptures and that the word whole in the scriptures, when Christ said, thy faith hath made thee whole, he was referring to not just physical healing, but emotional and spiritual healing. So there's a story in the scriptures, where a woman who's been bleeding reaches out and touches his robe and she's healed. And I'm sure because of the Jewish law at the time that to spend all that time bleeding, she was pretty much isolated because you couldn't be around people if you were bleeding. And then he says there are 10 lepers he heals, and he says, go away, show the priest you've been healed. And one comes back and thanks him. And he says, where are the other 9? How would he know? But Christ then says to him, thy faith hath made thee whole. To the rest, he said, you've been healed of the leprosy. But for him, thy faith hath made thee whole. He's referring to that emotional and spiritual healing as well. And we've been married now for 25 years. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary. And I do see that promise has come to pass. And it has been a lot of hard work. No.
Been a steep learning curve, has it?
Yes. And we're still working on it. Yeah.
So that kind of brings you up to date more or less then.
Yeah, what happened is part of that. So I'm still selling stuff at the beginning of the marriage, and he took his pension early, and we just did various things to make sure we had money coming in. And then at one point, I was told I should start writing these experiences on the internet. Now, this is back in 2000, and blogs aren't real big then. They didn't quite know how to do it. I can remember praying and then finding this site that was called opendiary.com, which is still up, still available. And you could go in, you just set up almost like a private blog. And it was for people who wanted to blog anonymously and just, get to know people anonymously from all over the world. And so I wrote a bunch of stories of what was happening. This happened. This is what I learned. I had this prayer, and this is what happened. I told the story about how I met my husband. I told the story about when my one son was 15. He was just so arrogant and cocky and rude. I said to Heavenly Father, I love him because he's my son, but I don't like him much. And he said, well, I want you to pray this prayer. Pray to see him as I see him. And then I had this experience where, do I have time for my experience?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm at my mom's house, and this is actually happened before I met Bill. So it's around, 95 or so. And as I'm at my mom's house, and she has a bunch of women's magazines next to the couch. And I picked one up and I started flipping through it. And I found an article that looked interesting. It was about this kid who had accused a favorite teacher, a coach, of being sexually inappropriate with him. And then I started reading, thinking, we had something like that just happened in our town recently. I'm going to read this, see what happened here. And then I realized it was about our town and what had happened in our town and our school. And as I read it, he said that he had been basically pilloried at school, that people were mean to him and bullied him because they loved this coach. But he had on the bed, it was almost suicidal, and he had on the bedside stand next to him the one thing that kept him going. He had in a frame standing on there a petition that basically had said at the top, we support you through this. We're here for you. And it only had 3 or 4 names on it. And as soon as I read that line, I knew whose name was at the top of the list, because I remembered the day that I had dropped my son, my 15-year-old, off at school. And he had said to me, I want to pass this petition around in school because I don't like what's happening to that boy. And he went, because you had to go ask in the office if you could do it. Anyway, I saw him in the afternoon. He came out and I said, how'd it go? And he goes, mad. He said they wouldn't let me pass it around. They said they were not talking about this at school anymore. And we don't want it to be talked about at school anymore, so you can't pass that petition around. So he and a few of his friends had signed it. and that's all the signatures he could get, and he gave it to the boy. And so that's who God saw, the sort of young man who would see that and take care of it. And he's still that. He's, what is he now? He just turned 40. And, we had the COVID, right? And everything shut down. Libraries shut down. Public restrooms shut down. Now, what are you thinking when I'm telling you all this? Well, let me tell you what he was thinking. What are the homeless people going to do? Where are they going to go? And they want soup kitchens to, practically shut down. They shut down restaurants. So he started taking food around, and he goes and he's petitioning to at least have some public bathrooms opened, because what are the homeless supposed to do without that? And that's he's still that person today.
I know what they did around here for the homeless. They put them up in hotels.
You guys
They turfed them out now, but because it's back to normal.
Yeah. So, in the US, it would be state by state. What did they do? And even city by city. Some cities they would do that, but some homeless people, sometimes they just plain don't want that. I know that for a fact, because I often give them rides. And they're like, I'm not going into that place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have no idea why I got off on that. Or how we're moving ahead here. But yeah,
so he's still doing sort of charitable work then.
Yeah.
Still fighting the causes of those that can't fight it themselves.
So, yeah.
And this is a cocky little 15-year-old then.
Yeah, that cocky 15-year-old is grown up to be fine. Turns out, all works out,
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband and I served a couple of missions. We sold our place in California. Then we served as missionaries, one's inner city Albuquerque, spent a lot of time teaching at the jail and stuff. Then we went up to Alaska. Turned out we loved Alaska. I didn't think I would. It was dark, it's cold, there's grizzly bears. Like, I don't think I want this life. Yeah. And then, so I was writing these stories. That's what I was telling you. These are the kinds of stories I was writing. Like, here's this story, here's that story that I'm putting on the site. And one day God said, I want you to make that into a book. And so I'm trying to read the stories and figure out how to make a book out of it with chapters, And he's like, no, this is the book. So if you've ever read the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, where there's like a story that's 1 to 3 pages about some kind of inspirational thing, then the next one, that's what my book is like. It's about stories like that. Here's some stories. And that was the first book I wrote. And then the second one was about what happened when we were on our missions, the people we helped and things we learned. And then I'm working on the third one, which is about this healing marriage, this idea of how we started out in one place and ended up with healing for everyone around us. Yeah.
So
and now I'm doing podcasts, because I said,
well, you're podcasting it all out.
Yeah. And he's like, take the message, give your to-do list to God, and he'll make more of your life than you even believe is possible.
Well, you can have my to-do list. It's not a lot on it most of the time.
Yeah, and I started when there was more on it than I could do. But it's interesting. I keep thinking, what if everyone got up every day and just said, what do you want me to do today, God? No matter what your faith is or what your belief is. How different would our world be? Because often he's just sending me out to do some simple thing for someone, but it makes a huge difference.
Wow. And that's what you're doing, making a difference.
I hope. And then I was saying, well, I don't know. Now what am I supposed to do? The books are written. Now what? And it was be on podcasts. And I said, I don't have a clue how to be on podcasts. So I went on an author site and said, how do you be on podcasts? And it said, well, I go to Podmatch. So I went to Podmatch, and here we are, Tim.
We are. And thank you so much for coming on. It's been fascinating.
Do you have more questions? Because I know I just kept talking.
No, that's the way I work. I sort of chuck the odd pennyworth in, drag you back a little bit, let you go. Okay. I've enjoyed it.
Okay.
You made my job very easy.
Oh, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I was one of those kids who came home with report cards that said talks too much.
Yeah. Well, Margaret, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.